He said I was his entire world, claimed every moment was mine while silently tearing me apart. And I stayed, because I loved him. But then, I gave him a pain that will stay with him for the rest of his life. I remember the way his voice used to tremble when he called me home, as if I were the answer to every silent prayer he ever whispered into the darkness. As if I were the light he'd been chasing for years through a storm he never named. I believed him. God, I believed him. I met Aiden when I was barely holding myself together. My world was a fragile sculpture of grief and silence after my father passed away. I'd lost direction, lost sleep, lost the version of myself I used to be proud of. And there he was, kind eyes, soft laugh, a hand that reached out like it had been waiting for mine. He didn't just enter my life. He flooded it. Morning texts, late night calls, surprise visits with coffee and flowers, and that ever-repeating phrase, "You're everything I ever needed." I should have paid attention to the way he said it, like a man collecting, not loving. Like someone keeping trophies, not memories. But I was desperate. Desperate to be seen, to be chosen. And he made me feel like I was more than just the broken girl I saw in the mirror. He made me feel whole. For a while. It started small, almost invisible. A jab here. "Did you really wear that out today?" A silence there. "That's not how it happened, babe. You're too sensitive." I brushed it off. I told myself love wasn't perfect. That real relationships meant compromise, patience, and forgiving the bad days. But the bad days started stacking like bricks. And soon, I couldn't breathe under the weight of them. He would disappear for hours, sometimes days, offering no explanation. He'd scroll through his phone at dinner, smiling at messages I'd never see. I asked once, gently, and he snapped. Told me I was insecure, controlling, that I needed therapy, not a boyfriend. I cried in the bathroom that night, muffling my sobs with a towel. When I came out, he was asleep, peaceful, like he hadn't just carved my heart out with his words. But the next morning, he made me breakfast, kissed my forehead, held me like nothing ever happened. And stupid, broken me, I stayed. Because I loved him. Because I believed the version of him I met in the beginning was still somewhere inside. Because he used to be good to me. I became a ghost of myself, carefully choosing words so I wouldn't set him off. Walking on glass, smiling through pain, making excuses for the bruises no one could see. When my best friend Emma told me he wasn't good for me, I stopped answering her calls. She said I was changing. She was right. But I told myself she didn't understand him like I did. No one did. He had a way of pulling me back in every time I tried to leave. A tear. A whisper. "I don't know what I'd do without you, baby." And like a fool, I believed I was his world. I believed my love could fix him. Until the day I found the messages. Hundreds of them. Different names. Different faces. Same promises. "You're all I think about. I wish I met you before her. She's not like you. She doesn't really get me." Each word was a dagger. But the worst part? He didn't even try to deny it. He looked me straight in the eye and said, "It's not like you've been exciting lately anyway." And just like that, my heart didn't break. It burned. That was the moment I realized he never loved me. He loved the way I loved him, endlessly, blindly, stupidly. And I decided right then. If pain was what he gave, pain would be what I returned. If pain was what he gave, pain would be what I returned. But I didn't scream. I didn't throw things. I didn't even cry in front of him. That would have given him too much power. And he didn't deserve one more ounce of my emotion. Instead, I smiled. A soft, controlled, terrifying smile. And for a second, just one, I saw something flicker in his eyes. Fear. But he blinked it away like it didn't belong there. He shrugged and muttered something like, "You'll get over it," and walked away like I was just another chapter he'd finished reading. He didn't know I had just begun to write my own story. And this time, the ending would be mine. That night, I packed a bag. Not to run, not this time, but to reset. I went to stay with Emma. She opened the door and without a word, wrapped me in a hug. For the first time in what felt like years, I let myself fall apart in the arms of someone who didn't want to break me. I'm ready now, I whispered. And she knew what I meant. Emma was smart, strategic, cold when she needed to be. She once told me, don't get even, get ahead. And I held on to that like gospel. Over the next few weeks, I studied Aiden like a subject. His patterns, his passwords, his routines, his weaknesses. You see, when you spend years loving someone with your whole soul, you collect their secrets like petals in your palm. Soft at first, but sharp when you close your fist. I created a version of myself he wouldn't question. Sweet, apologetic, submissive. He welcomed me back like nothing had happened. See, we always find our way back, he said, arms around my waist. I smiled up at him. Let him believe the lie. Meanwhile, I set the plan in motion. Aiden had one vulnerability. His image. He lived for admiration, online and off. Perfect boyfriend. Loyal son. Successful entrepreneur. But behind closed doors, he was chaos wrapped in charm. And so I gathered evidence. Screenshots. Voice recordings. Photos. Everything. Not just of how he treated me, but the lies he told every other woman. The ones he swore didn't exist. Emma helped me create an anonymous blog. It looked like a lifestyle site, but every post was a breadcrumb. One that led back to him. He never suspected a thing. He was too busy telling me he was proud of how forgiving I was. Too busy texting women I'd already contacted. You'd be surprised how quickly women will turn on a man when they realize they weren't the only one he was lying to. Within a month, I had 20 strangers on my side. Some hurt, some furious, all willing to speak. The blog exploded overnight, exposing Aiden Monroe, the man behind the mask. Screenshots, timelines, voice notes. Even his own family saw it. His mother called me, trembling. I didn't raise him to be like this, she said. But I wasn't doing this for her. I was doing it for me. For every version of me that cried in silence. For every moment I questioned my worth because he made me feel replaceable. Aiden called me the next night. Screaming, threatening, begging, crying, all in one breath. You ruined my life, he shouted. And I smiled, truly smiled for the first time in forever. No, Aiden, I said calmly. I just showed the world who you really are. Then I hung up. But I wasn't done yet. Pain wasn't just about exposure. Pain was about the emptiness that follows. The silence that screams louder than words ever could. So I vanished. Blocked him on everything. Changed my number. Moved cities. Left behind nothing but the ruins of what he'd built his ego on. Emma and I watched from a distance as the fallout consumed him. The brand deals ended. His company dropped him. His reputation destroyed. He tried to salvage it, of course. Played the victim. Posted dramatic captions. But the internet never forgets. And the women he hurt weren't silent anymore. His world crumbled. And he couldn't find me in the wreckage. That's when I knew. This was just the beginning. This was just the beginning. Because breaking Aiden publicly was justice. But making him feel it, making him live in the ashes of his own ruin, that was revenge. He could rebuild his image someday. He could lie to new people, spin new stories. But what I planned next would make sure he'd never trust his world again. You see, I wasn't just the woman he broke. I had been the woman who saw every corner of his soul. And now, I was the one who could shatter it. I had learned his patterns so well that I could predict his next move before he even made it. He tried to get sympathy. That was phase 1. A video surfaced of him crying on a podcast, talking about how cancel culture had destroyed his mental health. I've made mistakes, he said with a cracked voice. but I never meant to hurt anyone. The comments were brutal, because by then, I had already released a second wave of content. Videos of him mocking women in private voice notes. Clips of him laughing about how easy it was to manipulate people. There was no room for doubt anymore. This wasn't a misunderstanding. This was a pattern. And still, I wasn't satisfied. Because Aiden had always been 5 steps ahead. Until now. I created a fake identity. It wasn't hard. He always loved attention, and especially admiration from strangers. I became Lila, a young entrepreneur who'd seen his podcast. She was naive, sweet, forgiving, the exact type he used to hunt. I slid into his DMs under a private account, complimented his courage, told him he deserved a second chance. He bit instantly. Within 3 days, he was opening up to Lila. Within a week, he was flirting. Within 2, he was making plans to finally be real with someone again. He had no idea he was falling in love with the ghost of the woman he once destroyed. I dragged it out. Let him believe he'd found something pure again. He told Lila everything, even things he hadn't told me. Things I recorded. Things I saved. One night, he told her he still thought about me sometimes. That he missed the way I used to worship him. But he said I was too emotional. Too much work. She'd never have the strength to do what you do, he typed. And I laughed. Because if only he knew. I was the one pulling every string. 2 weeks later, Lila ghosted him. No goodbye. No explanation. Just a note left in his inbox. Sometimes the women you break come back smarter than you ever imagined. I can only imagine the look on his face. I didn't just want to break him romantically. I wanted to dismantle him emotionally. To take the one thing he loved most. Control. So I went to the one place where Aiden's control had always gone unchallenged. His job. Even after the public fallout, Aiden was trying to start again, small-time consulting, under a new name. I sent his entire client list a package. Anonymous. Sealed. Undeniable. Inside. His fake aliases. Conversations with women he'd manipulated. Bank statements showing shady financial activity. Testimonials. All of it. The result? 3 clients dropped him that week. 2 sued him. 1 exposed him in an online video that went viral again. He tried to track the source. He had no idea it was me. No idea that the woman he once called fragile was now the one orchestrating the slow death of his empire. He started spiraling. Friends stopped answering his calls. Even his brother unfollowed him on everything. I knew that part hurt more than anything. Aiden craved loyalty. Worship. Now, he was surrounded by silence. One night, Emma forwarded me a voicemail she'd intercepted. He'd accidentally called her thinking it was someone else. His voice was hollow. Panic. I don't know what's happening. Everything's gone. Everyone's gone. I keep thinking she's behind it. I swear, sometimes I feel like she's watching me. Like she's waiting. He was right. I was waiting. Because the final act hadn't begun yet. And that would be the one he'd never see coming. Because the final act hadn't begun yet. And that would be the one he'd never see coming. See, Aiden had always taken pride in one thing. That he could read people. Manipulate them. Stay ahead of them. So I made sure his downfall wouldn't come from noise or chaos. It would come from quiet precision. I had already destroyed his relationships, his reputation, and his sense of control. But there was still one piece left. The one thing he guarded even more than his image. His secrets. Buried deep in an old laptop he thought no one knew about. I did. Because 3 years ago, on a random Thursday night, he drunkenly showed me where he kept all his real tea. Back when I was still too in love to understand what that meant. Encrypted folders. Hidden files. And one drive he only used offline. I had memorized the password. It was the name of his first dog, Shadow. I don't know why I remembered. Maybe because it was the only time he ever sounded genuine. Emma and I tracked down the laptop. It took effort, bribing a friend of his to borrow it for a night. What we found inside? Dark. Worse than I expected. There were folders filled with private conversations with other women, vulnerable, exposing messages he never had the right to keep. Photos. Videos. Manipulative guides he wrote, literally step-by-step instructions on how to break a woman down emotionally and rebuild her into someone useful. He didn't love women. He collected them, controlled them, broke them, and documented it like trophies. I stared at the screen for hours. Not crying. Not angry. Just cold. It all made sense now. It was never about me being too emotional. It was about me being too aware. He was afraid of women who saw him. And now? He had every reason to be terrified. We couldn't just release everything. That would get us sued. But we didn't need to. We handed it to the one person who could take him down legally. His former business partner. The same man Aiden had once scammed out of a contract by manipulating him during a family crisis. He tried to sue Aiden once, lost due to lack of proof. Until now. We sent the files anonymously with one line. Here's everything you couldn't prove before. A week later, I got the news. Formal legal action had begun. An investigation was underway. Aiden was being served. And still, he didn't know who was behind it all. I made sure of that. I wanted the paranoia to eat him alive. I wanted him looking over his shoulder, wondering if every woman on the street was someone he'd wronged. If every message was a trap. If every silence was a setup. Emma called it psychological warfare. I called it balance. Because while he had spent years creating storms in other people's hearts, now he was living in one of his own. A storm without shelter. Without a single hand reaching to pull him out. He tried to rebuild again. Created a new identity online. Started fresh, under a fake name with a fake story. I found it within days. And I sent every one of his new followers the blog. With a simple message. Just in case you need the truth. He deleted the account within 48 hours. I didn't stop. Every time he tried to rise again, I was already standing on the cliff waiting to push him back down. Because now, I was the storm. But the true finale, the one I had been building toward for months, came quietly. One morning, I received a letter. Aiden had checked himself into a treatment facility. Mental health, they said. There was a line at the end, almost an afterthought. She broke me. I folded the letter, placed it in a drawer, and stared at the sunlight coming through my window. No smile. No satisfaction. Just silence. Because I wasn't proud. This wasn't about winning. This was about closure. About showing the girl I used to be that she wasn't crazy, wasn't weak, wasn't just a game to be played and forgotten. Aiden would never heal. Not because I ruined him, but because he built himself out of the pain of others. And when you do that, you're already hollow. All I did was hold up the mirror. And now, he's the one who has to live with what he sees. He's the one who has to live with what he sees. And me? I was finally learning how to breathe again. But don't mistake that for peace. Healing doesn't come wrapped in sunlight and tied with a bow. It comes in quiet nights where the silence doesn't suffocate you anymore. It comes in the mornings where you no longer check your phone with dread. It comes when your laughter doesn't feel borrowed. And that kind of healing? I earned it. Because I didn't just walk through hell. I rebuilt myself in its flames. Stronger. Sharper. Unforgiving. Still, there were days where the memories whispered. Not because I missed him. God, no. But because trauma doesn't vanish just because your abuser disappears. It lingers. It echoes in mirrors, in songs, in moments of stillness. Sometimes, I'd wonder how he was. Not out of care, but curiosity. Had he finally faced the truth? Had he finally admitted, even to himself, that he was the villain in his own story? Then, one day, I saw him. I wasn't looking for him. It was chance, or maybe fate, playing one final card. I was at a coffee shop in a different city, 2 hours from where I used to live. Emma and I were catching up, sipping lattes and laughing. And then I looked up. And there he was. Aiden. Thinner. Older. Eyes darker, not from lack of sleep, but from too many nights staring at a ceiling that wouldn't forgive him. He didn't see me at first. But when he did, he froze. And I saw it all. The recognition, the fear, the shame, flash across his face like lightning. I didn't flinch. I didn't look away. I just stared back, calm and still. And then I smiled. Not cruel. Not kind. Just knowing. He turned and left. Didn't say a word. Didn't order his coffee. Didn't even try to approach me. Because he knew. He no longer had the right to speak my name. Emma leaned in. That was him, wasn't it? I nodded. She didn't say anything else. She didn't need to. Because the victory was never in watching him fall. It was in knowing I had risen. Weeks passed after that moment. And the final piece of the puzzle clicked into place. I received a message, not from Aiden, but from one of the women he had hurt years ago. One I had reached out to during my investigation, who never replied. Until now. She said she'd seen what I did. That she'd watched from the shadows. And because of it, she had left an abusive relationship of her own. She'd gone to therapy. She'd started painting again. And she wanted to thank me. Not for revenge. Not for the drama. But for surviving out loud. That's when I realized. This story was never just about him. It was about every woman who's ever been told she's too emotional, too dramatic, too much. Every woman who's been rewritten as the villain in a story she bled to keep alive. Every woman who thought survival meant silence. We were never too much. They were just too small to hold what we carried. I published my final blog post that night. Not under a fake name. Not behind anonymity. I signed it with my real name. Because I was no longer hiding from what he did. He should be hiding from what I became. And the title of that post? He said I was his whole life, smiled while watching me shatter. That's when I realized I was just the pain in his story. But then, I turned every second of his life into his punishment. It went viral. Not because of the scandal, but because of the truth. And sometimes, the truth is the most powerful form of revenge. Sometimes, the truth is the most powerful form of revenge. But the truth doesn't just expose others. It frees you. That final post, the one with my real name, my unfiltered pain, my unapologetic voice, it didn't just end Aiden's chapter in my life. It burned the whole damn book. And I didn't look back at the ashes. Because for the first time in years, I was no longer surviving. I was living. I started getting messages. Hundreds. From strangers, friends, even women I hadn't spoken to since college. They told me they saw themselves in my story. They told me they finally had the courage to leave, to speak up, to stop blaming themselves. And that's when I knew. My pain had become a weapon, yes. But it had also become a torch. Lighting the way for others who had been crawling in the dark too long. Meanwhile, Aiden's life was unraveling faster than even I had planned. Legal charges were gaining traction. Multiple women had come forward now. His past, all those lies, secrets, manipulations, was finally standing trial in the light. I didn't have to do anything else. I didn't even show up in court. Because his punishment had already begun the moment the world stopped believing him. But there was one thing left. Something I hadn't planned. Something that changed everything. One morning, I woke up to an email. No subject line. No name. Just one sentence. You were never the one who was broken. I was. And I broke you because I hated that you were still whole. It was from Aiden. I stared at it, heart silent. Not racing. Not aching. Just still. Because for all the chaos he created, for all the pain he left in his wake, that was the first honest thing he had ever said to me. And the irony? It was too late to matter. I didn't reply. Not because I wanted him to wonder. Not because I wanted to hurt him. But because some words don't deserve closure. Some chapters end with silence, not out of weakness, but out of finality. I spent the next few weeks pouring my story into something bigger. A podcast. A platform. Not just for me, but for all the women like me who were tired of hiding, tired of being shamed into silence. We called it the Shatter series. Every episode told a real story. Raw, unedited, and forgiving. And every time a woman spoke, a piece of the world shifted. A wall cracked. A light turned on. Pain became power. And one day, a message came in from someone unexpected. His mother. She said she'd listened to the episodes. Said she was sorry. That she didn't know what her son had become. But she saw now who he had hurt. She asked for nothing. No forgiveness. No excuses. Just acknowledgement. And somehow, that broke me more than anything he ever did. Because even in his wake, there were still people trying to clean up the blood he spilled. I realized something then. This wasn't a story about revenge anymore. This was a story about awakening. Mine. And hopefully, theirs. Because yes, I made sure he never played again. I made sure he bled. But I didn't do it just to hurt him. I did it because women like me deserve to be heard. Not just healed. And if there's one thing I want every woman listening to remember, it's this. You are not what they did to you. You are what you choose to become after. And I chose fire. I chose fire. Not to burn others, but to burn away the version of me they tried to leave in ruins. And from those ashes, I built a woman who didn't just survive. I built a woman who rewrote the rules. By now, the Shatter series had exploded beyond anything I imagined. It was featured on news outlets, podcasts, mental health panels. Survivors from all over the world were reaching out, sharing their stories, finding each other, building something out of the pain. And in every message, every trembling voice that finally dared to speak, I saw a version of myself. The girl who once whispered into the dark, "Please, just let someone believe me." Now she was the one listening and believing others. As for Aiden, he was done. His business had collapsed. His name was blacklisted from every major investment firm. His family had distanced themselves, not out of shame, but self-preservation. Even the women he hadn't technically hurt no longer defended him. Because silence speaks louder than excuses. And Aiden's silence was deafening. Then came the final blow. The one I hadn't orchestrated, but felt like poetic justice anyway. A woman he had targeted years before, one who had disappeared off social media, left the country, and vanished after their relationship, returned. Not quietly. Not cautiously. She filed her own case. With undeniable evidence. With her own story. And most importantly, with her name. And suddenly, everything I'd built became the foundation for something legal. Real. Permanent. Aiden wasn't just falling from grace anymore. He was sinking. I watched it all happen from a distance. No glee. No celebration. Just the cold, satisfying sound of balance being restored. And yet, deep down, a small part of me wondered, was it enough? Could anything ever truly be enough to pay for what he stole? For the girl I used to be? I got my answer the day I saw him again, one last time. A trial hearing. I wasn't required to attend. But I showed up. Not for him. For her. For the girl I used to be. For the woman he broke and tried to erase. I wore white. Not black. Because this wasn't mourning. This was resurrection. He walked in, hands trembling, eyes hollow. He looked older than he was. Not because of time, but because guilt ages faster than years ever could. He looked up, saw me, and for a flicker of a second, I swear, he saw her. The girl who once cried at his door, who once begged him to stop lying, who once clung to his promises like they were air. But that girl was dead. Standing in front of him now was the woman he built, and the storm he never saw coming. He lowered his gaze, didn't say a word, and I smiled, not out of cruelty, out of closure, because he finally understood what I had become. His consequence. I walked out before the hearing even began. Didn't need to hear the testimonies. Didn't need to watch the verdict. Because I wasn't waiting for justice from the system. I had already delivered it. Not with fists. Not with violence. But with truth. And survival. And the kind of strength he never thought I could carry. And in that quiet moment, as I stepped outside into the sunlight, I finally felt it. Freedom. Freedom. Not the kind that screams or dances, but the kind that sits gently on your shoulders, like sunlight after a long, brutal winter. I didn't cry. I didn't laugh. I just breathed. And for the first time in years, it didn't hurt to exist. People often ask me now, how did you survive? They mean it as a compliment, as admiration. But the truth is, I didn't just survive. I chose to live, even when it would have been easier to disappear. I chose to speak, even when silence felt safer. And I chose to turn every ounce of my brokenness into a weapon Aiden never saw coming. He tried to write my story, tried to paint me as the fragile one, the emotional one, the one who would fall apart quietly. But I didn't fall. I rose. With every bruise he left, I carved out strength. With every lie he told, I built a platform of truth. And with every moment he smiled while watching me shatter, I gathered the pieces and made a crown. They say revenge doesn't heal. And maybe they're right. Maybe revenge isn't supposed to fix you. Maybe it's just meant to return balance. To remind them and yourself that you're not the victim in their fairy tale. You're the reckoning at the end of it. Months passed. The world moved on, as it always does. But the story? It lived. Not as a wound, but as a warning. And then, one day, I got another letter. Handwritten. No returned address. It was from someone I didn't expect. His sister. She wrote, I always thought he was the strong one. But now I see you were. She thanked me. Said her own daughter listens to my podcast. Said they talk about red flags. Said they talk about boundaries. Said they talk about healing. And that's when I knew. The story I told didn't just end with revenge. It began something new. Not all pain turns to power. But mine did. Not all revenge brings peace. But mine did. Because I didn't just destroy him. I reclaimed me. And if you remember nothing else from this story, remember this. He said I was his whole life, smiled while watching me shatter. That's when I realized I was just a pain in his story. But then, I turned every second of his life into his punishment. Not with violence. Not with rage. But with a truth he could never outrun. A voice he could never silence. And a woman he could never break again. Because I made sure. He'll bleed every day, without a single drop of blood spilled. And me? I'll never bleed for him again.